The FIA just confirmed what everyone in Formula One was afraid to say out loud. Red Bull didn't just build a bad car, they built a car based on the wrong reality. 1 full second per lap, gone. A chassis that behaves differently at every speed. Upgrades that make the car slower, instead of faster. And a wind tunnel so outdated, it cannot even simulate the conditions of modern F1 cars. Max Verstappen called it impossible to drive. A rookie from their own junior team eliminated him in qualifying. 32 seconds lost in a single race. And now, the governing body itself has confirmed the core issue. This is not a setup problem. This is not a driver problem. This is a system failure at the heart of Red Bull's entire development process. And what you're about to hear reveals how one hidden flaw turned the most dominant team in Formula One into a team that no longer understands its own car. At first, Red Bull didn't believe it. They couldn't. Because what the FIA has now confirmed goes against everything a top Formula One team relies on. The idea that your own tools are lying to you. In the beginning, the signs were small. A few tenths missing. A balance that felt slightly off. Nothing unusual. Nothing alarming. Because every team has difficult weekends. Every car has limitations. But then, the gap didn't close. It grew. From tenths to half a second. From half a second to a full second per lap. And that's when the confusion started. Because inside the factory, everything said the RB22 should be competitive. The simulations were clean. The numbers were consistent. The aerodynamic maps looked correct. On paper, the car worked. But on track, it didn't. And that's where the first real question appeared. What if the problem isn't what we built? What if the problem is what we believed? Because in Formula One, everything depends on correlation. You design a car in simulation. You validate it in the wind tunnel. You confirm it on track. That loop has to match perfectly. But with the RB22, that loop was broken. Completely. Because the FIA didn't just highlight a small mismatch. They confirmed a structural limitation. A wind tunnel that cannot maintain stable airflow conditions. A system that becomes inconsistent with temperature changes. A facility that cannot accurately reproduce ground effect behavior at high speed. And that changes everything. Because ground effect is not just another aerodynamic detail. It's the foundation of these cars. The way they generate downforce. The way they behave in corners. The way they respond to every input. And if you can't simulate that correctly, you're not designing a Formula One car. You're guessing. That's exactly what happened. Without realizing it. Because every decision on the RB22 came from data that looked correct, but wasn't. The floor design. The balance targets. The weight distribution. All of it built on a model that didn't reflect reality. And when the real car hit the track, the truth became impossible to hide. The balance didn't match. The aerodynamics didn't behave as expected. The car changed character, depending on speed. Understeer in slow corners. Sudden oversteer in fast ones. A window so narrow, it almost disappears. And that's why Verstappen said it. Not difficult. Not challenging. Impossible. Because when a car behaves differently in every corner, there is nothing to adapt to. No pattern. No consistency. No control. And that's when Red Bull realized something far more serious than being slow. They weren't just losing performance. They were losing understanding. Because now, every upgrade becomes a risk. Every change becomes uncertain. Every decision is based on data they no longer trust. And that's the moment a dominant team loses its biggest advantage. Not speed. Not power. But certainty. And without certainty, everything starts to fall apart. And this is where the situation becomes impossible to control. Because once Red Bull stopped trusting their tools, they lost the one thing that made them unbeatable. Precision. Because in Formula One, speed is not just about having a fast car. It's about knowing why it's fast. Knowing what to change. Knowing what will happen before it happens. That's how Red Bull dominated. They didn't guess. They predicted. But now, that entire system is gone. Because if your wind tunnel gives unstable data, and that data feeds your simulations, then every prediction is flawed. And that's exactly what the FIA confirmation exposes. Not just a limitation. A chain reaction. The tunnel produces inconsistent airflow data. That data feeds the CFD simulations. The simulations generate a model of the car. And that model becomes the RB22. But if the first step is wrong, everything that follows is wrong. And that's why the car behaves the way it does. Because the aerodynamics were designed for conditions that don't exist on track. At low speed, the car doesn't generate enough front load. At high speed, the rear suddenly gains more grip than expected. The balance shifts. Unpredictably. Violently. From corner to corner. And that's not something you fix with setup. That's something built into the DNA of the car. And that's why every attempt to fix it failed. Because Red Bull wasn't correcting a problem. They were chasing a moving target. They brought upgrades. New aerodynamic packages. Revised setups. Different configurations. And sometimes, the car looked slightly better. But then, the next session, it was worse again. Because the underlying model never matched reality. And that leads to the most dangerous situation in Formula One. You don't know if your upgrade worked. You don't know if it failed. You don't even know what the car should feel like. And that's exactly what happened in Japan. A new package. Predicted to improve performance. But on track. It made the car more unstable. More unpredictable. And that's when everything collapsed. Because now, there is no reference point. No baseline. No direction. Just confusion. And while Red Bull is dealing with that, their rivals are doing the opposite. Mercedes arrives at the track, knowing the result. McLaren predicts gains with near-perfect accuracy. Ferrari builds step by step, with confidence. Red Bull discovers the car in real time. And that delay is everything. Because while they are learning, they are losing. Every lap, every race, every opportunity to recover. But here's where the situation becomes even more serious. Because this isn't just about the season. This affects the future. Because if the system is broken, it doesn't fix itself in the next car. It carries over. The same tools. The same limitations. The same uncertainty. And suddenly, this isn't a bad car. It's the beginning of a long-term problem. The kind that ends dominant eras. Because Formula One doesn't forgive uncertainty. It rewards clarity, control, understanding. And right now, Red Bull has lost all three. Which leads to one final reality. The FIA didn't just confirm a problem. They confirmed the worst possible scenario. Red Bull didn't just build a slow car. They built a car without knowing what they were really building. And in Formula One, that is the one mistake. That changes everything. And this is where the final truth becomes impossible to ignore. Because once the FIA confirmed the root of the problem, everything else suddenly made sense. The weight, the balance, the failed upgrades, the unpredictable behavior. It wasn't a list of separate issues. It was one single failure, spreading everywhere. Because the RB22 was not designed incorrectly in one area. It was designed incorrectly at the source. The data. And that's why every fix created another problem. Because think about what Red Bull was actually doing. They were trying to correct a real car. Using a model that wasn't real. They adjusted the balance. Based on simulations that didn't reflect the track. They modified aerodynamics. Based on airflow that doesn't exist in real conditions. They redistributed weight. Based on assumptions that were already flawed. So every change moved them further away from the solution. Not closer. And that's why nothing worked consistently. Because they weren't fixing the car. They were chasing an illusion. And that's the part that changes everything. Because in Formula One, you can recover from a bad concept. You can recover from a slow start. You can even recover from a major design mistake. But recovering from false data is something completely different. Because now, you have to rebuild your understanding from zero. And that takes time. Real data. Track sessions. Correlation work. Race after race, just to understand what the car actually is. And that's exactly what Red Bull is now forced to do. In the middle of a championship. Against teams that already have that clarity. And that's why the FIA confirmation is so critical. Because it doesn't just explain the RB22. It explains why Red Bull cannot fix it quickly. Because the problem is not a component. It's the system behind every component. And systems don't change overnight. They require infrastructure. New tools. New methods. A completely different way of working. And that's measured in years, not races. Which leads to the most important consequence of all. Even if Red Bull improves the RB22, even if they recover half a second, even if they become competitive again, that doesn't solve the real problem. Because the same wind tunnel remains. The same limitations remain. The same risk remains. And that means one thing. Every future car will carry the same uncertainty. Until that system is fixed. And that's why this moment is bigger than just one season. Because this isn't just the story of a failed chassis. It's the moment Red Bull lost the one advantage that made them untouchable. Understanding. Because for years, they didn't just build fast cars. They knew exactly why those cars were fast. Now, they don't. And until they get that back, no upgrade, no driver performance, no strategic decision, will be enough to return them to dominance. Because in Formula One, speed can be found again. Performance can be rebuilt. But understanding, that's the hardest thing to recover. And right now, that's exactly what Red Bull is missing. Which is why this isn't just a failure. It's the beginning of the most dangerous phase any dominant team can face. The moment they realize, they no longer know how to win. And this is where everything reaches its final consequence. Because once you lose understanding, you don't just lose performance. You lose identity. Because Red Bull was never just another fast team. They were the team that always knew. They knew where to find lap time. They knew how to develop faster than everyone else. They knew exactly what their car would do before it even touched the track. That's what made them dominant. Not just speed. Certainty. But now, that certainty is gone. And the FIA confirmation makes that brutally clear. Because this isn't a temporary setback. It's not something you fix with one upgrade. Or one race weekend. This is a reset. A forced reset. Because Red Bull now has to rebuild something they haven't questioned in years. Their entire development system. From the wind tunnel, to the simulations, to the way they validate performance. Everything. And while they do that, they're still racing. Still competing. Still trying to keep up with teams that are already ahead. And that's the real problem. Because Formula One doesn't stop. It doesn't wait for you to fix your system. It moves forward. Relentlessly. And every race Red Bull spends trying to understand the RB22 is a race their rivals spend getting faster. Extending the gap. Building confidence. While Red Bull rebuilds from confusion. And that's why this moment matters more than any single result. Because this is not about one season. This is about what comes next. Because if Red Bull doesn't fix the root problem, the next car carries the same risk, the same uncertainty, the same potential to fail. And suddenly, this isn't the end of one bad project. It's the beginning of a cycle. The kind that takes years to escape. But here's the final twist. The one that connects everything. Because despite all of this, there is still one path back. One way to recover. Not quickly. Not easily. But realistically. And it starts with something Red Bull hasn't had all season. Real data. Track understanding. Building a new model from reality. Not simulation. Not assumptions. But what the car actually does. Corner by corner. Lap by lap. Race by race. And that's exactly what they're trying to do now. Relearn their own car. Rebuild their own system. From zero. But that process takes time. And in Formula One, time is the one thing you never have. So now, everything comes down to a simple but brutal truth. Red Bull didn't just lose speed. They lost the ability to predict speed. And until they get that back, they're not chasing victories. They're chasing understanding. Because in the end, that's the real reason the RB22 failed. Not because it was slow, but because the team that built it no longer knew why it should be fast. And in Formula One, that is the moment everything changes.